Welcome to Learners Academy. I'm Mona Bhatia and today's poem is Please Listen. It's a beautiful piece of poetry. It tells you how to be a good listener. A good listener must understand the thoughts and feeling of the speaker. And it tells us how we should avoid interpreting and interrupting or jumping to the conclusion, and we should try to avoid giving unwanted opinions or advices. So let's go to the poem. Please Listen is a beautiful piece of poetry, and the author of this poem is not known. And this poem tells us the qualities of a good listener. The first stanza says, when I ask you to listen to me and you start giving me advice, you have not done what I asked. So in the first stanza, the poet says that when he asks someone to listen to him and that person starts giving advices, that person have not understood what he has asked. They have not done what he has asked. Listening requires to pay full attention to somebody's and what is he saying with full understanding. It is not about giving advices. Second stanza, when I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you are trampling on my feelings. So second stanza, and when the poet asks somebody to listen, the listener should not advise them not to feel in that particular manner. Then the listener is trampling his feeling. That means he's crushing his feelings. He's not understood the feelings. When I ask you to listen to me and you feel you have to do something to solve my problem, you have failed me, strange as that may seem. So in the third stanza, he's trying to tell us that when he asks to listen, the listener has to just listen. He doesn't have to do something to solve the problem of the speaker. He has to just listen. If the listener starts doing something for the speaker to solve his problem, he has just failed him. He has given a piece of advice that he's failed in his attempt. So even though this may appear very strange, but that's the fact. Now, when I ask you to listen, all I ask is that you listen. Don't talk or do, just hear me. So he says that all he asks is that the person should listen, not talk anything, not do anything, just listen. Advice is cheap. 20 cents will get you both Dear Abby and Billy Graham in the same newspaper. So he says advice is very easy to get. It's very cheap also. During his time, if you paid 20 cents, he could have got it from the newspaper columnist like Dear Abby and Billy Graham. You must have seen daily newspaper. They publish advices in the columns in exchange of money. It's a meager amount, but he's telling he had to just pay 20 cents to get those advices. So that means he's not asking for advices. And I can do for myself. I'm not helpless, maybe discouraged and faltering, but not helpless. So he says that he can help himself. He may be discouraged at this moment, he may be uncertain. So faltering means unable to decide, uncertain, but he is not helpless. When you do something for me that I can and need to do for myself, you contribute to my fear and inadequacy. That means he further adds that when he tells the problem and someone does something for him, then that helper is adding or contributing to the poet's feeling of fear and inadequacy. The helper actually makes the situation worse as the child starts feeling inferior or incapable of handling his problem. So he's appealing that don't do anything, just listen. But when you accept as a simple fact that I feel what I feel no matter how irrational, then I can stop trying to convince you and get about this business of understanding what is behind this irrational feeling. So, but if someone accepts as a simple fact that the poet has the right to feel the way he wants to, however irrational it may sound right now, but then only the poet will be able to tell him what is the reason for that irrational feeling. That means if the listener doesn't jump to the conclusions after listening, then the poet will feel confident and will open up his heart, and he tell everything that is there in his mind and why he's having all those irrational thoughts or feelings. That means the listener should give time to the speaker. He must just listen patiently. All right. Mm. And when that is clear, the answers are obvious, and I don't need advice. Irrational feelings make sense when we understand what is behind them, and when the reasons for his irrational feelings become clear, the answers to his questions are obvious. Those answers will come naturally, and he then doesn't need any advice. He says that irrational feelings make sense only when we understand what is the reason behind them. Perhaps that's why prayer works sometimes. For some people, because God is mute and he doesn't give advice or try to fix things. So now he concludes that perhaps this is the reason why prayers they work, because God is silent. He doesn't give advice or he never tries to fix anything. God just listens. It's a one-way traffic. So, and God listens silently because there is no communication, and God allows the person to find his own answers. So please listen and just hear me, and if you want to talk, wait a minute for your turn and I will listen to you. So poet again finally appeals or requests others to just listen to him without offering any advice or help, without judging him. And he says that if the listener wants to say something, he should wait for a minute for his turn, and then the poet will listen to him. Now, in order to have a better understanding of the poem, we'll go through certain questions. The first one is the speaker aware of his shortcomings? Of course, the speaker is aware of his shortcomings because he admits in the poem that he may be reluctant, maybe he's discouraged now, maybe he is full of fears, maybe he is inadequate at this moment, and even in one of the lines he says maybe he's irrational at the moment. Alright, so he is very much aware of his shortcomings. Does he want to improve? Of course, the speaker wants to improve, but he wants to do it on his own. He doesn't want anybody's advice. So how does the poet want to work it out? The poet wants to improve himself. He wants to just share his feelings with somebody who is a good listener, and somebody who can just listen and let him solve his or her own problem on his own. And the poet does not need any advice from anybody. He wants to make the other person understand the reason behind his feeling instead of calling them irrational. Alright, now is the poet willing to listen to the others? Yes, the poet is willing to listen to others. At the end of the poem, he mentions that he would listen to them once whatever he wants to say, he's done with his speaking. When he's done with his sharing of his problems, then he would, when he's done with his speaking part, he would definitely listen to the other person. So, and if they want to say anything, he is ready to listen to them. Now discuss how you can be a good listener. Now, so to become a good listener, there are many qualities that the poet has given us indirectly. So if you want to become a good listener, you should start listening to others with full attention. And as a good listener, you must understand the thoughts and feeling of the person who is speaking. And to be a good listener, you should also maintain an eye contact, show your empathy, show your concern, and you should also keep on acknowledging by just keeping an eye contact, and not giving by not giving any advices actually. uh, you should have show some gestures to indicate that you are listening, and you stop interrupting that person or jumping to the conclusion. And one should also avoid giving unwanted opinions or advices. So these are the qualities of a good listeners, and I would love to follow those qualities. The critical appreciation of the poem, please listen. The title of the poem is Please Listen. The title of the poem gives an idea that listening is very important. This poem is written by an author who is unknown, and the poet is speaking on behalf of teenagers, who is addressing his elders or peers, or maybe it is written on behalf of a person who is not heard properly, or those who doesn't have the habits of a good listener. This is being addressed to them, and the poet has something to say about the importance of listening. Now, the poet, as I've already told, the author is not known. And now we come to the rhyme scheme of the poem. It is written in free verse. The poem is written in a conversational language. This is called free verse, as the poem doesn't follow any rhyming scheme, and the poet has used colloquial style to communicate with the readers. Now, next topic is figures of speech. There are not many figures of speech in this poem except for the repetition. That I feel what I feel. Now the word feel is repeated, and even one line, when I ask you to listen to me. So this following line has been repeated 3 times to emphasize the importance of listening. So there is no other figure of speech which I can mark out. The next topic is the central idea. Now, the poem highlights the importance of listening. Most of the time, when people narrate their story, or and they are not at all seeking any advice, actually, the listener should just do the job of listening and should give them a chance to find their own answers. The reference of God is a very is an ideal listener, is a very novel idea, and if someone vents out his feeling, he is not seeking an advice. He is seeking a good listener who can understand the feeling. All right. Now we the next topic is why I like or dislike this poem. I really like this poem, as this poem depicts the inner feelings of a person who is not heard properly, and it is really painful when somebody is not heard properly. And people who are on a threshold of life where they need some friends or people who can just listen to them, their feelings, without judging them or giving advice. So this poem is for those people. And I like this poem for one more reason, that it has not used many poetic devices and no figures of speech except for repetition. But still, the language is simple and the message is loud and clear. Thank you very much for listening to the critical appreciation of the poem. You can, if you have any queries and any question, you can ask us on our email address that I'll be giving you in the next slide. Thank you very much for listening.